The Black Fortress stood like a monster against the sky, carved from stone that seemed alive with shadow. Its walls pulsed faintly with strange veins of glowing light, and its halls echoed with whispers too soft to be understood. Ethan, a human explorer far from home, stepped into the heart of this alien place. His boots left faint marks in the dust that no one had disturbed for centuries. The air was heavy, warm and cold at the same time, and each breath carried the taste of metal. He should have turned back, but something deeper kept pulling him forward, like a voice calling from beyond the walls. The deeper he went, the more the silence pressed on his ears. There were no guards, no signs of life, only endless halls decorated with spirals and symbols. His light flickered across murals showing tall alien figures bowing before a massive archway. That archway was everywhere, painted again and again, as if it was the heart of their existence. Ethan felt uneasy. He had stumbled into temples before, ruins of forgotten alien gods, but nothing felt as alive as this. Here, the walls almost breathed, and the symbols seemed to shift whenever he looked away. Finally, he found it. The chamber at the center of the fortress. The archway loomed higher than any gate he had ever seen, carved with sharp edges that twisted like claws reaching into the void. Faint light poured from its cracks, as though something waited just behind it. Ethan's chest tightened. He should not be here. Every part of him screamed to turn back, but his feet betrayed him, carrying him closer. The silence grew unbearable, and then, with a soft vibration, the archway responded to him. His hand rose slowly, almost against his will. He touched the cold surface of the archway, and in that moment, the entire fortress roared awake. The ground shook violently beneath him, dust fell from the ceiling, and the glowing veins in the stone burst with brightness. The murals lit up like living fire, and the air filled with the sound of voices chanting in a language he could not understand. Ethan stumbled back, heart racing, but it was too late. The archway now pulsed with light, alive as if it had been waiting for this one touch, his touch. A horn-like alarm blared through the fortress, rolling across the alien city outside. Shadows moved in the distance, wings beating against the air. Ethan's chest heaved as he realized he had triggered something enormous, something no alien had dared to touch for centuries. The ground trembled again, and from the archway, thin tendrils of light reached outward, crawling across the floor like searching fingers. They circled around him, surrounding him, as though claiming him. He tried to run, but his legs froze, bound by that strange glow. The silence shattered. A voice thundered through the chamber, sharp and furious. He turned and saw her, the mistress. She was tall, towering over him, her body wrapped in black armor lined with crimson. Her eyes glowed like molten fire, and her long weapon gleamed with energy, ready to cut through steel. Her soldiers spilled into the chamber, dozens of them, all armed, their faces a mix of fear and rage. But it was her voice that held everything in place. "Insolent human," she roared, her voice echoing like thunder inside the chamber. Her steps cracked the stone beneath her feet as she approached. She raised her weapon high, pointing straight at him, as if his existence alone was an insult. "You have entered the wrong orifice, one you have defiled." The word struck him like a whip. Defiled? He looked around in confusion, trying to understand. The soldiers hissed, their weapons aimed, but none dared fire. The archway still pulsed with that strange light, protecting him in some invisible way. The mistress's face twisted with fury, but behind her burning rage, there was something else, fear. Ethan swallowed hard. His mouth was dry, his heart hammering so loud he thought it would burst. He wanted to speak, to explain that he had not meant to trespass, that he had not even known what this place was. But the way she looked at him made words vanish from his throat. To her, it did not matter. He was already guilty. He had touched what no human should touch, opened what no alien could open. The soldiers shifted uneasily. One of them whispered something, pointing at the archway. Ethan followed their gaze. The glow from the door was growing brighter, brighter than the torches on the walls, brighter than the suns outside. And it pulsed in time with his heartbeat. His presence was feeding it. The chamber was alive because of him. The realization sank into him like ice. He had awakened something far beyond his understanding. And now, there was no turning back. The mistress's voice shook the walls again. "You should not exist here. You are a violation." Her words cut like blades filled with venom, but beneath them, Ethan heard something that chilled him more than anger. Doubt. She did not know why the chamber had answered him. Her soldiers looked at one another nervously. Some lowered their weapons slightly, unsure if killing him was even possible. Ethan's hands trembled at his sides. He forced himself to speak, though his voice cracked. I don't know what I touched. I don't know what this is. His words sounded small against the mistress's power, but they carried into the chamber. The archway's glow flared again, as if answering him directly. The soldiers gasped, stepping back. The mistress's eyes widened for just a moment before narrowing again with dangerous fury. The fortress shook harder. The ceiling groaned as if the entire structure would collapse. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and from the archway came a low hum, deep enough to rattle his bones. Ethan realized the chamber was not just a room. It was alive, aware, and now connected to him. The mistress raised her weapon higher, her voice thundering with final judgment. You will pay for this defilement, human. If the chamber protects you, then I will break both you and it. The soldiers roared in unison, their voices shaking the chamber. Ethan stood frozen, caught between the glow that shielded him and the mistress's blade ready to fall. The fortress itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the clash that would decide whether he lived or died. The chamber still glowed with a strange heartbeat light, wrapping Ethan in its pulse. The soldiers stood frozen around him, their weapons raised, but their eyes flicking nervously toward the mistress. Her towering figure cut through the glow, her black and crimson armor glistening like the skin of a beast ready to strike. Every step she took echoed like a hammer on stone. Her weapon buzzed with deadly energy, sharp enough to split him in half with one swing. She circled him slowly, her voice low and venomous. You dare touch what belongs to us. You dare wake what your kind cannot understand. Ethan's body trembled, but he forced himself to stay on his feet. His knees wanted to collapse, but he locked them in place. He had no weapon, no armor, not even the knowledge of what he had done. Still, something deep inside told him to stand. The mistress's soldiers hissed like a pack of predators eager to tear him apart, but none dared move closer. The glow from the archway spread across the floor in lines that moved like rivers of fire. Whenever a soldier stepped too close, the light flared, forcing them back. It was not just protecting Ethan, it was warning them. The mistress stopped only a few steps away, her face inches from his, her burning eyes piercing into him. You have defiled a sacred gateway, she spat. For this crime, your blood will pay. She lifted her blade high above her head. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, the blade reflecting the glow as it hovered, ready to fall. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But instead of striking, a wave of light burst from the archway, exploding outward like a shield. The mistress was forced back, stumbling as her soldiers cried out. The ground shook under their feet. Ethan staggered too, but the light held him steady, wrapping him tighter like unseen hands pulling him upright. Gasps filled the chamber. Soldiers looked at each other with wide, fearful eyes. Some whispered in their alien tongue, their words sharp with disbelief. Ethan could not understand their language, but he understood their tone. They were afraid. Even the mistress paused, lowering her blade slightly, her eyes narrowing. Impossible, she whispered, almost to herself, then louder with fury to cover her fear. Why would it protect you? Ethan shook his head, his voice cracking as he shouted back, I don't know. I didn't mean to. But before he could finish, the archway pulsed again, brighter, louder, filling the chamber with vibrations that shook their bones. The soldiers fell back, many raising their weapons now not at Ethan, but at the glowing door. One of them shouted something, his voice trembling. Ethan turned his head toward the archway. For a moment, he thought he saw shapes within the light, huge, shadowy figures moving behind the cracks, like giants pressing against a thin wall. The glow hissed and cracked, almost like it was calling. His stomach turned cold. The mistress snapped her fingers, and immediately soldiers closed in, though still keeping distance from the glowing floor. Take him, she ordered. If the chamber resists, then let us drag him from its grasp. His flesh will still answer to my blade. The soldiers obeyed with hesitation, chains snapping in their hands. They threw them forward, and the metal writhed in the air as though alive, pulled by the glow before wrapping around Ethan's wrists and ankles. He struggled, but the chains tightened fast, binding him like a captured beast. The mistress watched carefully, her face a mask of hatred. But inside her thoughts churned like a storm. No alien of her people had ever awakened the chamber. Generations of warriors, priests, and rulers had tried. None had succeeded. And now, a human, an outsider, an insect, had touched it once and awakened its heart. She would not admit fear, but her pride burned. If this truth spread, her authority might break. She needed control, and control meant Ethan must be bent, broken, or destroyed. Ethan was dragged before her, the chains cutting into his skin. He winced in pain but held her gaze. She leaned down close, her voice a venomous whisper only he could hear. "Whatever secret binds you to this chamber, I will tear it out of you, piece by piece if I must." Her words were a promise of torment, but Ethan saw the doubt flicker behind her eyes. The soldiers hauled him toward the exit, pulling him away from the archway's glow. At first, the chamber resisted, the light stretching like threads trying to pull him back. Sparks of energy cracked through the air. The fortress groaned, its walls trembling as if the very structure mourned his removal. But finally, the glow dimmed, retreating into the cracks of the archway once more. The mistress let out a sharp breath, her blade lowering. Outside the chamber, the fortress was no quieter. Alien voices filled the air as news spread fast through the city. Crowds gathered, their faces twisted with both fear and fascination. They shouted at the soldiers dragging Ethan, some demanding his execution, others whispering of prophecy. Ethan's ears caught fragments of words he could not understand, but their tone carried both hatred and awe. He was thrown to his knees in the open square before the fortress. The mistress raised her hand, silencing the chaos. She declared with a voice that echoed across the walls, "This human has defiled the sacred gateway. His life is forfeit, but first he will face the trial of pain. If he survives, the chamber's choice may be judged by blood and fire." The crowd erupted, some cheering for his death, others gasping at the decree. Ethan lifted his head weakly, confusion swirling in his mind. Trial of pain? He did not know what it meant, but the looks on the aliens' faces told him enough. Even they feared it. The mistress stood above him like a dark queen, her blade raised toward the stars. Her soldiers pounded their weapons against the ground in rhythm, the sound shaking through the stone. Ethan's heart raced, his chest heaving. He had no choice. Whatever this trial was, it was coming. And if he failed, death would be the least of his punishments. The mistress turned sharply, her cloak snapping like a whip in the air. Her last words before she left him chained on the stone cut deeper than any blade. "You will suffer, human, and when you break, the chamber will belong to me." The great hall of judgment was filled with alien voices, sharp and guttural, bouncing off the stone walls like the growls of beasts. Torches burned with blue fire, their light casting long shadows across the towering statues of ancient rulers. Ethan was dragged inside, his wrists bound by the same living chains that had bitten into his skin since the moment of capture. His head hung low, but his eyes scanned everything, searching for a chance, a weakness, anything that might let him survive. At the far end of the hall sat the council. Dozens of alien lords, their faces marked with the lines of age and power. Their robes shimmered with colors no human eye had words for, but their expressions were sharp, filled with hate, curiosity, and fear. Each one stared at Ethan as if he were not a man, but a disease. In the center stood the mistress, tall and unbending, her crimson armor catching every flicker of torchlight. She lifted her spear high, and at once, silence fell. She spoke in a voice that rolled like thunder. "This human has entered the forbidden chamber. He touched the sacred gateway. He woke it." Her words echoed in the hall, heavy with venom. Murmurs spread across the council, some gasps sharp, others mocking laughter. One elder slammed his clawed hand on the arm of his throne and hissed, "Impossible! No alien has ever succeeded. A human could not." But another leaned forward, his eyes glowing faintly, and whispered, "Yet the chamber glowed for him." We all felt it. The mistress's jaw tightened. Her pride wanted to deny it, but the truth could not be hidden. Every soldier in the fortress had seen the light protect Ethan. Every ear in the city had heard the fortress roar awake. Her voice cut through the whispers. The law is clear. Defilement must be punished, but the chamber itself resists his death. So let him face the trial of pain. Let his flesh be tested by fire. If he survives, then perhaps the chamber has chosen him. If he dies, then the stain of his crime is cleansed. The council erupted in harsh voices, some pounding their staffs against the stone, others spitting curses in their language. But slowly, one by one, they nodded. The law demanded blood. The trial of pain was the only answer. Ethan's chains jerked hard, pulling him forward into the center of the hall. He looked up at the towering figures above him, his voice breaking as he shouted, "I didn't mean to. I don't even know what I did." His words echoed helplessly, bouncing off alien ears that did not care for excuses. The mistress stepped closer, her shadow falling over him like a blade. She crouched low, her face inches from his, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Ignorance is not innocence. You will bleed human, and the galaxy will see what you truly are." A loud horn blasted, shaking the walls. The guards yanked him back, dragging him out of the council chamber. The crowd outside had grown even larger. Hundreds of alien eyes glared at him, some filled with hate, others with fear, but all burning with hunger to see him suffer. They threw objects at him, stones, bits of metal, glowing sparks that burned his skin. His arms shook from the weight of the chains, his legs dragged like dead wood, but still he moved forward, forced by the soldiers pulling him. The mistress led the way, her stride long and unbending. Her soldiers shouted, keeping the path clear through the mob. But as Ethan was dragged toward the arena, carved into the side of the mountain, something strange began to happen. The glowing veins in the fortress walls pulsed again, just faintly, as if answering his steps. Some of the aliens noticed. Their eyes widened. Their voices whispered nervously. A few even stepped back, crossing their arms in a sign of warding. They feared him, even as they demanded his pain. The arena gates loomed ahead, made of black iron etched with scars from centuries of battles. The trial of pain was not a myth. It was real, and countless had died here before. Ethan stumbled as the gates opened with a deep groan. Heat rushed out, so hot it burned his skin instantly. A wave of foul air filled his lungs, a mixture of ash, blood, and something chemical. He gagged, coughing hard, but the soldiers shoved him forward. Inside, the ground was uneven, covered in jagged stone that glowed faintly from beneath, as if fire burned just under the surface. Metal spikes rose from the ground, some stained dark from old blood. Chains dangled from above, and pools of liquid bubbled in the corners, their steam carrying a stench of acid. The mistress raised her spear toward the crowd. Her voice rang out, strong and merciless. "Behold, the human who defiled our sacred gateway. Today he will prove his worth, or he will be broken for all to see." The crowd thundered in response, their voices shaking the arena like a storm. Ethan was shoved into the center. The chains on his wrists unlocked suddenly, clattering to the ground. He rubbed the raw wounds they had left, blinking against the blinding heat. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his body and the will to live. The mistress looked down at him from her high seat, her expression cold, but her eyes burning with something more than hatred. She wanted him dead, yes, but she also wanted to see what he could do. Maybe even she was curious. She lifted her hand, and with that signal, the trial began. A wall of flame burst from the arena's edge, racing in a circle around him. From the shadows of the gates, monstrous creatures crawled forward, their skin blistered, their jaws dripping with acid. The ground shifted, cracking open, forcing him to jump back or fall into pits of boiling liquid. The trial was not a fight, it was torture, a test of endurance designed to strip body and soul. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he could not win. But he could not give up either. He clenched his fists, sweat pouring down his face, his throat dry as stone. Somewhere behind the heat, behind the screams of the crowd, behind the monsters closing in, he thought he heard it again. The faint hum of the gateway calling to him, as if watching him even here. The mistress leaned forward in her seat, her voice a whisper to herself, unheard by the others. "Show me, human. Show me why the chamber chose you." The heat inside the arena pressed against Ethan's skin like fire, every breath burning his lungs. The ground beneath his boots cracked and hissed, glowing red from hidden rivers of molten stone. Around him, the crowd screamed and roared, their voices a storm of hunger for blood. He stood alone, sweat dripping down his face, his heart pounding like a drum that wanted to tear free from his chest. The mistress sat high above in her black throne, her crimson armor gleaming in the firelight. Her eyes locked on him, cold but sharp, waiting for him to break. The monsters released into the arena crept closer, their bodies covered with blistered scales. Their eyes shone like hot coals, and acid dripped from their jaws, burning holes into the stone where it landed. Ethan stumbled back, his bare hands shaking, but there was nowhere to run. Behind him, a wall of fire roared, cutting off escape. The trial of pain had begun, and there was no way out. One of the creatures lunged first, its claws slashing through the air. Ethan threw himself to the ground, rolling across the sharp stone. The claws tore only empty air, but jagged rocks ripped into his skin, leaving his arms and side bleeding. He pushed himself up, groaning, as the crowd cheered louder. Another monster came, spitting acid. The green liquid splashed onto his leg, burning through cloth and flesh. He screamed in agony, but even as the pain spread like wildfire, he forced himself to move. He ripped a piece of broken chain from the ground and swung it wildly, striking the beast's snout. The monster howled, stumbling back. The mistress leaned forward, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She expected him to last minutes at most. Yet here he stood, bleeding and burned, but still moving, still fighting. Her soldiers muttered among themselves, some scoffing, others narrowing their eyes. This human was not breaking as fast as they had hoped. Another wave of fire exploded from the ground, forcing Ethan to jump. His legs shook, the burns throbbing, but he refused to fall. His vision blurred with heat and pain. Every nerve screamed at him to give up, to collapse, but he clenched his teeth and pressed forward. A third monster rushed him, jaws wide. He dodged at the last moment, grabbed a metal spike sticking from the ground, and rammed it into the creature's throat. Hot blood sprayed, the monster collapsing in a heap. The crowd gasped. Few had expected him to kill even one. The remaining beasts circled, slower now, their eyes wary. Ethan bent over, panting, his chest heaving. His hands trembled, his wounds stung, and his body wanted to collapse. But something deep inside refused to let him. He remembered every struggle on Earth, every moment where he had pushed beyond his limit. Humans were fragile compared to many races, but their strength was not in claws or acid. It was in endurance, in the refusal to surrender no matter how hopeless it seemed. That same fire burned in him now, stronger than the flames around him. The mistress whispered to herself, her voice sharp with disbelief. Why does he not break? She had seen warriors greater than him scream and beg for death inside this arena. Yet this human, weak and unarmed, stood against monsters and fire and refused to fall. A strange unease twisted inside her chest, though her face remained hard before the watching crowd. Another monster lunged, its claw raking across his side, opening a deep wound. Ethan staggered, blood pouring freely now. He screamed in pain, his legs almost giving way. The beast reared back for another strike. At that moment, Ethan grabbed a sharp shard of rock from the ground and drove it into the beast's eye. The creature shrieked, thrashing wildly before collapsing dead at his feet. The crowd roared in shock, some in rage, others in awe. Ethan swayed, barely able to stand. His arms hung limp, his breaths ragged. But still, his eyes burned with stubborn fire. He spat blood onto the ground and raised his head toward the mistress. Even from across the arena, she saw the defiance in his gaze. It was not arrogance, not even pride. It was the raw refusal of a man who would not be broken, no matter the pain. The last monster circled, hissing, waiting for him to drop. Ethan bent, picked up the broken chain again, and wrapped it tight around his fist. The beast lunged, jaws wide. He shoved his bleeding arm deep into its mouth, the chain biting into its teeth, and with a roar of desperation, he pulled hard, tearing its jaw apart. The creature fell limp, twitching, before going still. For a moment, silence fell over the arena. The crowd stared, stunned. Then voices exploded, louder than ever, shaking the walls. Some shouted for his death anyway, but others were silent, shaken by what they had seen. Ethan fell to his knees, chest heaving, blood soaking his body. He was broken, scarred, burned, but alive. Against all odds, he had endured the trial of pain. His vision blurred, the world spinning around him, but he refused to collapse completely. He planted one bloody hand on the ground and pushed himself up to one knee, glaring up at the mistress with eyes that still burned. Her face was unreadable, but inside her heart raged. She had wanted his death, yet she could not deny what all had seen. The chamber had awakened for him, and now he had survived a trial meant to kill even her strongest warriors. Whispers filled the crowd. Prophecy. Chosen. Impossible. The words echoed, and though the mistress silenced them with a glare, she could not silence them inside herself. Ethan's body trembled as he forced himself to stand fully, swaying but upright. He looked at her again, blood dripping from his lips. His voice was hoarse, broken, but strong enough to carry. "I'm not done yet." The mistress's fingers tightened around her spear. She should have felt triumph at his suffering, but instead she felt something dangerous, something she would never admit aloud: respect. The arena smelled of smoke, blood, and burnt stone. Ethan stood in the center, his body shaking, wounds burning across his skin. His breaths came out ragged, every inhale like knives cutting through his chest. Around him, the ground was littered with the dead monsters, their black blood steaming where it touched the hot stone. The crowd, thousands of alien voices, howled like a storm, but beneath their cries was something new: fear. He had survived. He was not supposed to. The mistress rose from her throne above, her crimson armor glowing in the firelight. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed unease. She had seen humans before, weak compared to her kind, fragile things that broke easily. Yet this one had endured the trial of pain. Not only endured, but killed the beasts meant to destroy him. Her pride rebelled at the thought, but the truth was before her, and the entire city had seen it. If she killed him now, the whispers of prophecy would only grow. Guards rushed into the arena, dragging Ethan's battered body upright. His knees buckled, but he forced himself to stand, his defiance clear even through exhaustion. The mistress's voice boomed across the arena, silencing the crowd. "The trial has been survived. The law is satisfied. But the question remains: why did the chamber awaken for him?" The words struck like thunder. Murmurs spread through the aliens watching. Some shouted that he was cursed, a defiler who must still die. Others whispered that perhaps the chamber had chosen him for a reason. The mistress turned sharply and ordered, "Bring him back to the chamber. Let us see if his touch opens what has been closed for centuries." Ethan was dragged once more through the fortress halls, his body heavy with pain. His mind swirled with half-conscious thoughts, but he still remembered the glow of the archway, the way it pulsed with his heartbeat. Fear mixed with curiosity inside him. He had no idea why it responded to him, but he knew he could not hide from it now. The chamber was darker than before, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The archway stood silent, cracks glowing faintly like embers waiting for air. Ethan was shoved forward, stumbling onto the cold stone floor. Chains clattered against his wrists, but one soldier pushed him closer to the door. The mistress stood behind him, her spear pointed at his back. "Touch it again," she commanded, her voice sharp with both threat and curiosity. Ethan raised his shaking hand. The moment his fingers brushed the archway, light burst from it like a storm breaking free. The ground trembled, dust rained from the ceiling, and the murals on the walls lit up in streams of fire. The glow spread across the chamber, brighter than before, reaching into every crack and corner. The air vibrated with a deep hum that rattled bones. Ethan stumbled back, shielding his eyes, but the light followed him, wrapping around him like a second skin. Gasps filled the room. Soldiers staggered, shielding their faces from the blinding glow. The mistress held her ground, though her jaw clenched tight. She had expected a flicker, perhaps another pulse of energy, but not this. The archway itself began to split down the center, cracks forming like veins of fire. Slowly, painfully, the door began to open. From within came a force older than empires. A deep breath seemed to spill out of the chamber, as though something inside had been waiting all this time. The fortress walls shuddered, and for a moment, shadows like giants moved within the light. The soldiers fell to their knees, some screaming, some whispering prayers. One cried out in terror, "The Chosen! It is true!" Others shouted in denial, their voices breaking. Ethan's chest heaved. He felt the pull of the archway, not like a hand dragging him, but like a bond tying him to it. His skin burned where the light touched, yet he could not step away. He was a part of it now. His mind filled with flashes, alien cities rising, wars fought, rulers crowned before the archway. He saw visions of power, both creation and destruction, all tied to this chamber. His knees buckled as the images flooded his mind, but he forced himself not to collapse. The mistress's eyes narrowed. Her heart raced with something she had not felt in years: fear. If this human truly was chosen by the chamber, then everything she knew, everything she commanded, could crumble. Her people had waited centuries for the archway to open, their priests sacrificing lives, their rulers bleeding armies, all for nothing. Yet now, with one accidental touch, this outsider had done what none of them could. Her soldiers looked at her, their eyes questioning. Some waited for her command to kill him. Others looked at him with awe. The balance of power in the fortress shifted with every passing second, and she knew it. Her voice thundered through the chamber, desperate to hold control. Do not be fooled. The chamber responds to corruption. He is no savior. He is poison. But even as she spoke, the archway opened further. A flood of light poured out, and within it stood a massive engine of unknown design, a machine that pulsed with energy beyond comprehension. Its surface was etched with alien symbols, but some shifted into forms Ethan could almost read, like they were translating themselves for him. The mistress's face twisted in shock. This was no mere doorway. It was a weapon, a source of power that could bend entire civilizations. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The glow still surrounded him, refusing to let go. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Why me?" But the chamber gave no answer. Only the hum of power filled the room. The mistress's soldiers argued among themselves, their voices breaking the order that had always defined their ranks. Some cried that he must be killed before he took the chamber's power. Others swore that if they killed him, the fortress would fall with him. The mistress raised her weapon high, her mind torn between rage and fear. She wanted his blood. She wanted to silence the whispers, to crush the prophecy before it consumed her rule. But deep down, she knew the truth. The chamber had chosen him, and if she killed him now, her people might turn against her. Ethan struggled to his feet once more, swaying but standing. His body broken, his face pale, yet his eyes locked onto the mistress with fire. For a moment, neither spoke. The glow of the chamber filled the silence. Then, with a voice low but steady, he said, "This isn't yours anymore. It never was." The mistress's hand trembled around her spear. Every instinct told her to strike him down. But for the first time in her life, she hesitated. The fortress shook like a beast in chains, dust raining from the ceiling as the chamber's power pulsed through every wall. The archway behind Ethan glowed like a second sun, its lights spilling into the streets outside. The alien city trembled with panic. Bells rang, horns blared, and soldiers rushed through the halls, shouting warnings of an invasion. The power that had awakened was not hidden anymore. It was a beacon, and every enemy of the mistress's people could see it. Ethan staggered back, his skin still glowing faintly with the chamber's touch. His chest rose and fell in painful breaths, but he stayed upright. The soldiers in the chamber aimed their weapons at him, their hands trembling, waiting for the mistress's command. She stood frozen, her spear lowered, her face hard, but her eyes burning with conflict. Killing him would silence the whispers, but it might also destroy the only chance to control the chamber's power. The ground rumbled again. A horn blast echoed through the fortress, different from before, this one sharper, urgent. An officer stumbled into the chamber, blood on his armor. "Mistress," he shouted, his voice filled with fear. "They are coming. The rival clans march on the fortress. They have seen the light. They want the power for themselves." The mistress's jaw tightened. She turned slowly, her cloak snapping behind her, and looked at Ethan. He stood weak but unbroken, his eyes defiant even as blood dripped from his wounds. She hated him, she feared him, but she also knew the truth. Without him, the chamber would not obey. Without him, her fortress would fall to the enemy. She raised her spear, pointing it not at Ethan but at her soldiers. "He lives, for now. He will fight with us." Her voice thundered through the chamber, silencing their protests. The soldiers obeyed, though many looked uneasy, even disgusted. They had watched this human endure the trial of pain, awaken the chamber, and now stand beside their mistress. It was unthinkable, but survival demanded it. Ethan wiped the blood from his mouth and forced out words through heavy breaths. "I didn't come here to fight your war." His voice was rough, but steady. The mistress stepped closer, her burning eyes locking on his. "You touched the chamber. You made yourself part of our fate. Whether you wish it or not, you will fight. If the fortress falls, you die with it." The floor shook again as another blast rattled the walls. Outside, the roar of war drums echoed across the mountains. Ethan clenched his fists. He had no weapons, no armor, but he could see the truth in her words. Running was not an option. The enemy would kill him just as surely as her soldiers. His only chance was to fight and to survive. The mistress barked orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. Soldiers rushed to prepare defenses. Massive gates slammed shut, towers lit with fire signals, and war horns screamed across the city. Ethan was shoved into the armory, where alien weapons glowed on the walls. Most were too heavy for him to lift, their designs made for larger hands and stronger bodies. But he found one, an energy blade smaller than the others, light enough for him to hold. He strapped it to his arm, the hum of its power vibrating through his bones. The mistress entered the armory, her armor glinting, her weapon gleaming with deadly light. She looked at him, her lips curling into a sneer. "Do not slow me down, human. If you fall, I will not save you." Ethan met her gaze, his voice sharp despite his exhaustion. "Then don't get in my way." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the roar of soldiers preparing for battle. Her eyes narrowed, studying him. She saw not just weakness, not just defiance, but something more. A fire she had not expected. She turned away, hiding the flicker of respect that tried to surface. The fortress gates thundered as the first enemy strikes landed. The walls shook under the impact of massive weapons. Flames lit the sky outside, and screams of war filled the air. The mistress led her soldiers through the gates, her voice commanding, her presence unshaken. Ethan followed, his weapon in hand, his body aching, but his will unbroken. The battlefield outside was chaos. Enemy warlords had brought their armies, beasts with metal hides, soldiers carrying weapons that crackled with lightning. The sky itself seemed to burn as fire rained from siege engines. The mistress roared her orders, charging into the enemy lines with her soldiers at her back. Ethan stayed close, ducking under strikes, using his smaller size to slip between the towering warriors. At first, the soldiers sneered at him, expecting him to die quickly. But then they saw his cunning. He grabbed broken weapons from the ground, turning them into traps. He used enemy fire against them, drawing beasts into their own master's lines. He struck fast, never staying still, cutting down soldiers larger than him with skill born not from strength, but from desperation and wit. The mistress fought like a storm, her spear slicing through enemies like they were paper. But even she was forced to glance at him, her eyes narrowing each time he survived another strike, each time he killed another foe. She had seen warriors with power, with training, but this human fought with something else, a refusal to die, no matter the odds. The battle raged for hours, the fortress walls glowing with fire, the ground shaking with every clash. Ethan's body screamed with pain, his wounds reopening, but he pressed on, step after step. When a beast broke through the line, towering over the soldiers, it was Ethan who leapt onto its back, driving his energy blade deep into its skull. The creature fell, shaking the ground, and the soldiers around him roared in shock. The mistress spun her spear through 3 enemies, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Human!" she shouted, her tone no longer mocking but sharp with command. "Stay at my side!" Ethan stumbled toward her, his chest heaving, but his eyes burned with the same fire as hers. Together they stood, back to back, fighting through waves of enemies. For the first time, the mistress did not see him as filth, as a trespasser, but as something dangerous, something necessary. And though she would never admit it aloud, she felt a strange trust in that moment. He might be human. He might be weak. But he fought like no warrior she had ever known. The battle still raged, fire consuming the horizon, blood staining the ground. The mistress lifted her weapon high, her voice thundering across the field. "Hold the line!" Ethan tightened his grip, standing beside her, ready for whatever came next. The fortress would not fall easily, not while he still stood. The battlefield burned under a sky filled with smoke and fire. The fortress walls were cracked, towers shattered, and the ground soaked with blood. The enemy warlords had thrown everything against the mistress's people, and still the fight raged. Ethan stood in the middle of it, his body covered in cuts, burns, and bruises, yet his hands refused to let go of the energy blade. Every breath hurt, every step shook, but he pressed forward, one strike after another. The mistress fought near him, her spear flashing like lightning, her movements sharp and powerful. Soldiers followed her commands, but many had begun to look at Ethan too. They saw a human, smaller than them, weaker in body, but still alive after hours of endless battle. Some whispered that perhaps the chamber had chosen him for a reason. Others spat in disgust, refusing to believe, but none could deny the truth. They had seen him kill beasts and warriors that should have crushed him. The enemy pushed harder. From the smoke came war machines, massive engines crawling on legs of steel, their cannons glowing with energy. The mistress rallied her warriors, but the machines tore through their lines, crushing stone and flesh alike. Ethan's mind raced. He darted forward, climbing onto a broken wall, then leapt onto one of the machines. He drove his blade into a joint where metal met flesh, sparks bursting as the monster machine screamed. With desperate strength, he ripped the blade down, tearing through the glowing core inside. The machine exploded, throwing him across the battlefield. He crashed hard, rolling through dust and blood, his body almost breaking. He coughed, choking on smoke, but forced himself to rise again. His ears rang, his vision blurred, yet he saw the mistress staring at him from across the fire. Her eyes, for the first time, were wide, not with rage, but with something else. Shock. She had seen warriors die under those machines in moments, but this human had destroyed one with nothing but will and luck. The battle did not stop. More enemies surged forward, shouting war cries. The mistress roared in response, her voice carrying above all others. She fought with fury, but even she knew the fortress could not hold much longer. The enemy wanted the chamber, and nothing would stop them. Then it happened. The chamber itself answered. The archway in the heart of the fortress burst open fully, releasing a flood of light that lit the battlefield like a second sun. Both sides froze, eyes turning toward the fortress as the ancient machine inside revealed its full form. The hum shook the earth, the air alive with energy. Soldiers dropped their weapons in awe and fear. Ethan felt the pull again, stronger than ever. His skin tingled, his blood burned, and his heart pounded in rhythm with the chamber. He stumbled toward the fortress, his body moving as though dragged by unseen hands. The mistress saw it too. She shouted at him, her voice breaking through the roar of battle. "Human, only you can touch it. Go, before they take it from us." Ethan looked at her, disbelief in his eyes. "You trust me now?" He shouted back. She bared her teeth, her voice a mix of fury and truth. "I trust only what I see, and I see the chamber obeys you. Go!" He did not wait longer. He ran, his legs heavy, his body close to collapse, but the energy from the chamber pulled him forward. Enemy soldiers rushed to stop him, but the glow around his body flared, burning them away like ash. His own allies parted in silence, watching as he crossed the battlefield, a human glowing like a living torch. Inside the fortress, the chamber had changed. The archway no longer showed only cracks of light. It had opened into a swirling storm of energy. At its center stood the great machine, towering, humming, alive. Its surface shifted with symbols that twisted into shapes Ethan could almost read. He stepped closer, the glow wrapping tighter around him, pulling him into its heart. The mistress stormed in after him, her soldiers forming a line at the gates. Enemy forces smashed against them, desperate to break through, but the mistress held them back, her spear flashing like fire. Her voice roared above the chaos. "Protect him! No one enters until he is done." Ethan placed his hand on the machine. A surge of energy rushed through him, filling his veins with fire and ice. Visions exploded in his mind. Galaxies burning, fleets torn apart, worlds rising and falling. He saw the power of the chamber, a weapon that could destroy or save entire civilizations. His body shook violently, blood dripping from his nose, but he held on. The machine responded, its hum rising until it became a deafening roar. The fortress shook harder, cracks splitting across the walls. The enemy outside screamed in terror as beams of light burst from the archway, cutting through their armies like blades. War machines melted, beasts shrieked and fell, soldiers fled in panic. The mistress stood firm, her eyes fixed on Ethan as the battlefield turned. But inside, Ethan was drowning in power. His heart raced too fast, his mind filled with fire. He felt like he was breaking apart, like the chamber would burn him alive. Yet even through the agony, he clenched his fists and refused to let go. He remembered the trial, the pain, the mistress's hatred, the doubt in every eye that stared at him. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him fall. The machine pulsed one last time, a wave of light blasting out across the battlefield. Silence followed. When the glow dimmed, the enemy was gone, fled, dead, or burned to nothing. The field was littered with bodies, smoke rising into the sky. Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body shaking, his breath shallow. The glow faded slowly, leaving him pale and broken but alive. The mistress approached, her armor scorched, her face smeared with blood and ash. She stood over him, her spear in hand, her soldiers watching closely. For a long moment she said nothing. Then her voice, low but clear, cut through the silence. "Insolent human, you may have defiled what was ours, but now you are part of it." Her words were not praise. They were not kindness. But in them was something she had never given before, acceptance. Ethan looked up at her, his lips cracked, his eyes heavy, but he managed a weak, stubborn smile. He had survived. He had turned the impossible into truth, and the galaxy would never forget it.